Hi YouTube. Today I'm going to take you through a standing sequence. This is an old Iyengar standing sequence from the late 60s, early 70s. And I'm going to enter and exit the postures from this position, which I would say is a variation of Virasana or Vajrasana. And this shape is used a lot in Thai massage. The shape is used in Thai massage because it makes you tall. So if I was putting pressure on someone's body here with my palms, or my palms stacked, I'm taller so I get more of my body weight. It also allows me to extend my reach. And so I'm here, I can press. Okay, I've run out of room, but if I step a foot forward, this is about where my hand had ended before, it extends my reach through this lunging position. And then I can come back and spring back to here. So I'm going to be entering and exiting all of my postures from lifting up off of my heels and then stepping a leg forward. And you'll see as this sequence goes along that some of the transitions are pretty neat, and you focus on this lunge quite a bit. So you open the hip flexors. That lifting up from here engages the buttocks and the hamstrings. Many people, especially yoga practitioners, are weak in these muscles. We spend a lot of time stretching them. Any sort of straight leg forward fold is stretching the hamstrings, and many of the cross-legged positions have a lengthening effect on the buttocks, especially if you're prone to doing something like pigeon. A lot of pigeon can wreak havoc on the muscles of the outer hip and buttocks. And so I'll be entering and exiting my postures from here, and I'll take you through this old Iyengar sequence, which I'm a big fan of. It's very complete, very thorough. So I lift up and off of the heels. Again, buttocks are firm, hamstrings are firm, and then I'm going to step my right leg forward. I'm going to bring my fingertips together and my elbows out to the side. I'll rotate my torso just so you can see what that looks like. It's kind of a fake prayer. And I'm going to use this elbow as a reference point. As I step my left leg forward, I'm going to touch my left knee and my left elbow together. And if I turn to the side, just so you can see, I'll stop rotating once I'm going through the sequence. This is like a unsupported Utkatasana. If this leg was straight, you see where we end up. This is also kind of like a martial arts block. And so then I'm going to cross my left thigh on top of the right. And this is an eagle pose, Garudasana. Sometimes I like to lift the heel for a moment in Garudasana, challenge the balance, strengthen the calf muscle. I touch knee to elbow on the way back. I step backwards, and then I land in that initial lunge. Step the right leg back. And this is acting as my Tadasana. This is my resting point between postures. Lift up and off of the heels. Opposite leg, the left leg steps forward. I'm again touching that knee to elbow, and then the right thigh crosses on top of the left. It doesn't really matter which elbow you cross on top in this position. Different systems will have different opinions, whether it's the same side elbow as the knee or opposite side. I gravitate towards the opposite side, but stylistic preferences. And so you see that it keeps taking me back already to this lunge. And step back, then I can prepare for my next posture. Next posture is tree pose, counter pose to eagle. Stepping forward with the right leg, touch knee to elbow, and that gets my leg nicely set up for tree. I'll adjust slightly. I'll take the arms up and overhead. I'll lift the shoulders to get tall, tractions the spine. Again, I'll try to lift the heel of the standing leg. You saw it made me lose my balance a little. That's good. Touch on the way back. Can step back to this lunge. If you want even more of a challenge, you can touch the knee to the elbow on the way back. That will really get the hip stabilizers on the standing leg, the supported leg, to engage. Up again, left leg forward. So again, I'll touch here. Knee to elbow again, reference point. Slight adjustment. Arms up and overhead. I lift the shoulder blades. Try to traction the spine without flaring the ribs too much. And then I'll lift the heel. Try to strengthen those calf muscles. Improve the balance. That was nice. Touch. Going back. Try to touch on the way back. And I'm back to my Tadasana. I'm going to walk forward a little bit. Next pose is symmetrical. It's chair pose, Utkatasana. So from here, I'm just shifting back to my heels. I have the ability to squat fully, like a Malasana. I'm going to try to lift a little bit. So I'm thinking about a chair, my butt going back as far as I can, and then my knees bend more, and they start to go over the toe. I'll take the arms forward and up. And I have a nice Utkatasana. I like to come onto the heels for a moment. Sometimes I'll also straighten here, and then I'll enter it from the top. So I'll take the hips back, bending at the hips, and then bending deeper at the knee. That's my order of operations. I try to expand the belly and chest. And I end up in my starting position. Step back a little bit. Lifting up. I'll touch the knee to the elbow. Step forward. Now I'll have a triangle pose, Triconasama. So I'm rotating to my left, and I'm side bending to my right. And so as I rotate to the left, the right side of my abdomen gets firm, the left side is soft. The center is also firm. As I side bend to the right, it further firms that right side of the abdomen. Take hold of my right ankle, set my left leg up, and then finally straighten my right leg. Finishing touches on the pose, I rotate more from the belly, the chest, and then the shoulder, and then my arm extends. Two options for the neck. Gentle option is looking down at the right foot, the front foot. More difficult option on the neck is looking up at the left hand. I'm going to come through center here, rotating my torso downwards towards the floor. I'm set up nicely to get a Parshvo Tanasana. Start to open the hamstring deeper. And then if I bend, if I swivel at the back hip and bend the knee, lift the torso and back to my lunge. On the way back, maybe a little touch, knee to elbow. You don't have to do that final touch. It's difficult. You'll see as I do it, I kind of wobble a bit. It's hard balancing on a knee. Excuse me. Rotating to the right, that firms the left side of my abdomen. Side bending, lateral flexion, further firms the left side of my abdomen. I set up my back leg by lifting the knee and rotating so the outer foot comes to the floor. Take hold of the ankle. One of the last things I do is straighten the left leg. Rotate the belly and the chest. Internally rotate the shoulder. Reaching up. Again, looking down is easier on the neck. Looking up is harder on the neck. I did Ashtanga for so long that I often default to looking upwards. I'll expand the belly and chest, make the spine a little longer. Rotating the torso towards the floor, Parshvo Tanasana. I'm trying not to rest the hands on the floor so my legs work more. Sometimes people reach back, I'm not pulling. We're resting here. I bend into the left knee, swivel the right hip, touch the right knee down, lift the belly and chest. I'm back to my lunge. and I end up in my Tadasana shape. Lifting up, I feel the buttocks firm, the hamstrings have engaged. I believe that to lift up in this shape, the buttocks has to contract, and the hamstrings to some degree also have to contract. So it obliges the muscles to engage. I'm pointing it out that it's happening, but in theory, as you go through the sequence, it should just start to happen. And every time these muscles engage, their nervous system is telling these muscles to relax. That's a spinal cord nerve reflex. When one muscle engages, its opposing muscle is told to relax. And so hip extensors engage, hip flexors relax. Right leg steps forward. This is Warrior Two, Veerabhadrasana Two. I'll rotate my torso to the left. Right side got firm. I'm going to set up this back leg, lifting the knee, swivel. I'm thinking about opening in the groin, so my right knee is trying to move to the right. My left inner thigh is trying to move back and to the left. From this prayer position, this faux prayer, I can just take my arms out. It's useful to test in this pose by dropping the arms and seeing if they align with your legs. That generally means that you haven't taken your shoulders behind your midline. I'll expand the belly and chest. Looking over the right hand would be a classic drishti. But in theory, you can look over the left, or you can look straight ahead. Take the neck out of the equation. I'm going to rotate my pelvis and torso, so I'm back in that high lunge. Touch the knee down. I've made that half step, right? That's preparing me to maybe touch on the way back. Second side. Lifting up. Rotating to the right. That firmed the left side of my abdomen, but the right side has remained soft. Lifting the right knee. Swiveling that hip so the outer foot comes to the floor. I'm thinking about this left leg moving left. Right thigh moving kind of up and back. So the space between the groins opens. Extending the arms. I'll do that little test. Maybe from the back, you'll see if I took my arms too far back, very common, and I drop them, you see they fall behind the line of my hips and my legs. That means I'm flaring at my ribs and overly contracting between my shoulder blades. I want my shoulders in line with my hips. I can look forward. I just showed it's possible to look back. Once you know the rules, you can break the rules. Swiveling back through this lunge. You can see we've already done a lot of lunges in this sequence. So it's really getting the hip flexors to open, really getting the buttocks and hamstrings to contract. See, the balance is tricky on this side. Sometimes I extend this leg back here, just for a little extra. Warrior One, Veerabhadrasana One. Funny sequence that it goes Warrior Two into Warrior One. Stepping forward. So Warrior One's an interesting posture. I'm going to take my torso forward here, and I'm going to set up my back leg. I like to turn the back foot in a little bit. Now, Warrior One is a back bend. It's not a lunge. So the emphasis here is on the back muscles. So I'm going to imagine I'm doing Shalabhasana. Top of my thigh is the floor. I lift the head, I lift the chest, and I'm going to reach behind my back, and I feel that my back muscles have engaged. They're still engaged. Now I'm going to start to open at the hip. See if I lost it. I haven't lost it. I'll expand the belly, I'll expand the chest, and then I'll take my arms up and overhead. Again, looking forward, straight ahead is fine. If you want, you can expand the throat and look up. Sometimes I lower down slightly, and then by lifting back up, the back muscles engage further. I'm going to touch down here. Get that Parshvo Tanasana on the way back. It's important to stretch the hamstrings throughout this sequence a bit through that Parshvo Tanasana so you don't overly contract the back. Although this sequence is more focused on stretching the front of the hip and strengthening the back of the hip. It's good to have some balance. Excuse me. Right here. Come on. Good boy. Lay down. Thank you. Second side, warrior one. So again, I take my torso to the thigh. Just like Shalabhasana, if my belly was on the floor. I lift the head, I lift the chest, I lift the abdomen. Reaching behind my back, I feel that the muscles alongside either side of the spine have engaged. The erector muscles, the paraspinals. Right? I can set this back foot up. Sometimes it's good to be down and set it up there. I'll turn it in slightly. That's extreme. I'm engaged, I feel it. I'll open at the hips. I'll take the arms up and overhead. Expand the belly, expand the chest. Lift the shoulders, lift the throat. Again, I like to lower down a little bit and then find that back bend again in the air. From here, if I bring belly to thigh again, I can just straighten that left leg. I added an extra step on the other side. Somewhat distracting to talk and practice. Lift up, back to my lunge. Okay. Side angle, a Parjvakonasana. Similar to our triangle pose. Twisting the spine to the left. Side bending to the right. I'll bring my hand to my foot here, get the back leg set up. I have the ability to rest my fingertips on the floor, but some people need to rest maybe even forearm on thigh. Now I'll take this a little bit deeper. I'll rotate belly, chest, upwards towards the ceiling, and I swing the left arm in front of my body to take it overhead. So I'm lifting the left shoulder. I'm dropping the right shoulder. And that exaggerates the side bend. Rotate, expand the belly and chest. Groins are moving away from one another. Inner thighs are moving away from one another. Rotate towards the floor. Nice Parshvo Tanasana here. Second side. Side angle pose. Parjvakonasana. Rotating to the right, side bending to the left. Rotate more to the right through the belly and chest. Right arm swings in front. I expand the abdomen. I expand the chest. Left thigh, left inner thigh is moving to the left. Right inner thigh is pressing up and back at a 45-degree angle towards the ceiling where it meets the side wall. Rotating down towards the floor. Parjvakonasana. Sometimes called a pyramid pose. Although not its translation. Parjvo is intense side, like Parjvakonasana. Parshvo Tanasana, intense side stretching pose. Uttanasana. Okay, we have a twisting triangle next. Right leg steps forward. I begin with the spinal twist to the right, and then I bring the left elbow towards the right knee. Set up my back leg. Straighten my right leg. Left hip is trying to move back in space while the belly and chest twist to the right. I can look down, easier on the neck. Looking up, more difficult. I'm again trying to keep my right arm in line with my torso. Sometimes people overly extend the right arm back. They're faking the twist. I can turn my left shoulder in. That gave me a little bit more twist, while trying to keep the left hip moving somewhat backwards. This is a very easy transition to Parshvo Tanasana. One leg standing hamstring stretch. We have the second side. Rotating to the left. Right elbow towards the left knee. I set up my back leg. Last thing I do, well, one of the last things I do, is straighten the left leg. Because for some, that hamstring won't want to open. You'll stop here. Totally fine. You can still practice the spinal twist. Stretching the hamstring is just icing on the cake here. Twist the belly and chest. Right hip tries to move back. Turning my right shoulder in helps. Again, if I bend my elbow, I can touch the center of my chest. And then if I straighten the elbow without moving the shoulder blade, I know that I haven't overly extended that arm back. Even when I do touch my hands, I tend to just use the fingertips. I try to keep as little weight in my hands as possible. These are standing poses after all. And the more contact your hands make, the more weight that you keep in your hands. That's the less weight that your legs are bearing, and it's adding another support to the posture. And so instead of it being a two-legged stool that's trying to balance between the legs, you add that third leg. And it takes away a lot of the work that the stabilizers in the hips would have to do. Not just the hips, but the ankles, the feet, the little intrinsic muscles all the way through the body, including in the core and back. Twisting side angle pose. Rotating to the right. Left elbow towards that right knee. And then I have the ability to bring my left armpit to the right knee. And I can press that right knee towards the armpit and the left arm towards the knee, and that deepens the twist. I'll start by just lifting the knee and setting up the arms. So this right shoulder is lifting, this left shoulder is dropping. And for many, this twisting lunge is the better posture. That to bring this outer foot to the floor, everybody will lose some of their spinal twist. And for many, you're going to put a lot of pressure on the knee that the knee's not going to like. I've done enough of this posture and things that are a bit more advanced than it, so that I don't feel any discomfort or pain in my knee, but I do feel how much of the spinal twist I lose. And in my opinion, better to focus on the spine and not sacrifice the spine just to touch the foot down, especially if it's going to rotate the knee in a way that it doesn't like. In theory, if your knees can tolerate it, this is a great shape for the knee. It gets the quadricep to stretch somewhat fully, because all of the quads cross the knee, the front thigh muscles. Only one quad crosses the hip. And when we lift up, you lengthen that quad as well. So it can be good on the knees, assuming they tolerate that much of a bend. So Now we have a half moon pose, Ardha Chandrasana. And I'm going to do a couple variations here. So I'm going to step forward. I have two fingertips on the ground. Could be one, could be none. And then I turn the chest upwards a little bit. You saw that made the balance tricky. And this would be half moon as it appears in light on yoga. Sometimes you see people raise the arm. It's difficult for me to look at that top hand, so I'm not going to attempt it at the moment. But so I'll stay here for a moment without this hand on the floor. Now this is a variation I learned from Simon Borg-Olivier. So I'm side bending on this left side, finding my balance, lifting this back leg, and then he does a type of nerve stretch here. This is ulnar nerve, this top arm. This is a median nerve on left arm. But it's similar to Bruce Lee in his like a side kick. So sometimes I kick there, it's fun. Whee! I take this through a warrior three of sorts, touch down, and turn to my starting position. I actually like when I bounce around in my one leg standing poses. It lets me know that I'm actually challenging the balance. That all of that kind of bouncing and jumping around is getting a lot of little stabilizing muscles throughout the leg, and again, even perhaps the core to engage. So, second side. Left leg comes forward. Stepping forward, and I find this classic Ardha Chandrasana, half moon. Turn the belly and chest upwards towards the ceiling a bit. Unsupported, get this leg to work. And then side bend the torso. And then that got my leg to lift, so then I have to re-lift it. I'll do Simon's nerve stretches. I mean, I learned them from Simon. He didn't make them up. These are ways of lengthening the nerve pathway, and if you do enough martial arts or belly dance, Tai Chi, they show up all over the place. And then I'll play with my little Bruce Lee side kick, just for fun. But this kicking just made me able to deepen the posture a bit, so clearly some use to a bit of movement there. Take this through just a little warrior three. Standing on one leg, assuming the leg and hip is in good enough shape to do it to start with, is one of the best things you can do for the longevity of your lower extremity. So this is now warrior three. Sometimes I tie those two together. You saw I kind of exited through warrior three, but I'm doing them as separate postures today. Warrior three is a back bend. It's like a shalabhasana on one leg. So I lift the head and chest. Back muscles have engaged. And then you can do arm variations, bird wings, overhead. If you watched my general yoga sequence and saw what I did with Shalabhasana, similar. And then this is not in the Iyengar sequence, but I do it here. I make a twisting warrior three, or a twisting half moon, this is sometimes called. That pose isn't in the Ashtanga syllabus or light on yoga, but I think it's useful. should look in Dharma Mitra's book. He has a book of 1,000-ish asanas. And maybe the posture's in there. Second side. Lifting the head and chest. Back muscles are firmed. They're still firm. Warrior 3. Veerabhadrasana 3. Twisting Warrior 3 or twisting half moon. Could be a Parivrita Ardha Chandrasana, perhaps as a Sanskrit for this pose. Parivrita means to revolve or ring out. Twisting. So like twisting triangle, Parivrita Triconasama. Twisting side angle, Parivrita Parjvakonasana. Utkatasana Padottanasana. The Iyengar sequence just has really one variation here. I did Ashtanga long enough that I do a few extra. So I'm going to step directly to the one leg standing position like I did with eagle and tree. Once I touch the knee to elbow, I point the foot. That stretches the back of the thigh without the sciatic nerve, dorsiflexing, pulling the toes backwards, pushing the heel forward, stretches the sciatic nerve. It's possible to hold the big toe here. I like to hold the heel, pressing the buttock bone towards the heel, pulling back with my shoulder. Then I turn the thigh outwards, and I take the leg to the side. Again, a big toe is possible. A heel is possible. Come back. Stay unsupported for a moment. Second side, left leg steps forward. Point the foot. Generally safer to stretch the hamstring without also lengthening the sciatic nerve. But once you reach a certain point of openness in this area, that lengthening the nerve can add a little bit extra, can feel good. My hamstrings are consistently some of the tightest muscles on my body, and they've been that way for, well, a very long time. Front splits, Hanumanasana, always been a difficult posture for me, and one I don't practice much these days. But I've known a number of asana practitioners and dancers that have created hip injuries, some of which required surgery from doing too many splits. Labral tears, which is the cartilage in the hip, is quite common. Let's see what Iyengar calls this one. Urdhva Prasarita Padottanasana. So Urdhva is upwards, and Prasarita is a lengthening or a spreading. In Padottanasana, Yeka is 1, Pada is foot in asana, shape, pose, posture, stance, seat. A lot of ways to translate the word asana. So, it's a one-leg standing split. So, two ways to do this one. Again, you can have the hands on the floor if you'd like. I'm going to try as best I can to just hold on to my ankle. So this is with me trying to keep my hips square. And it limits how high the leg goes. If I turn my back thigh outwards, you see that it gets much taller. And then sometimes there I can try to turn the hip back in. The pose is fine. I don't have many thoughts on it either way. You'll probably be able to see the hip turn out better from this side. So I'm creating that forward fold in the spine first. And then the leg takes flight. I'm actively trying to internally rotate my right leg. And then if I actively externally rotate, the leg goes higher because I've taken the true limitation of the hip flexor out of it. This is similar to like a ballet split. You'll see the back thigh turns out. And I try to turn the thigh back in. I guess in theory it's possible to drop your head, try to touch the head to the shin if you want more. I'm not going to try for that today. It's okay to bounce around a bit on camera. It's probably not okay to fall entirely. Wake the dog. I'm going to turn my page here. We're almost at the end of the standing, the one leg standing section, and the sequence as a whole. So this is a standing half lotus. Ardha Padottanasana. Ardha half, Baddha is bound, and Padma is lotus. This is Parjvakonasana, and so intense lotus. Padma Uttana, Parshvo. So there's a standing upright. This has it in two sections, a bound and an unbound. So I'll do it as such. I like to bend the knee on the way down. In the one leg standing pose. With the hands on the floor, easier to touch the head to the knee. Holding the shin, more difficult. I'll come to this halfway point, and then I'll bind. I'll come down again. All right. Wow. I'm definitely spending more time in these postures than I normally do speaking. And across 20 some odd postures, maybe 5-10 seconds extra in each definitely adds up. And I'm doing a few extra minutes, perhaps, of standing on one leg. Overall, I don't hold my postures for a long time. I try to enter and exit them in a way that I'm getting the muscles responsible for doing the posture to fire which means the opposing muscles are being told to relax. And as muscles contract and relax, blood is moved through the system. And so I use postures much more as a way to move blood and perhaps energy through the body, as opposed to long static stretches to try to make my flexibility much deeper. I'm in the opinion that I have enough flexibility. Much smoother on this side. Maybe more concentration. I think it's important for a yoga practice to evolve over time and as we age. And I'm only 35, which is young, but the entirety of my 20s I spent doing Ashtanga yoga, and I progressed quite far in that system. I also worked my way through BKS Iyengar's Light on Yoga, and touched on and explored many of the deeper ranges of motion possible. And I kind of feel like I've done enough of that, at least for now. So I've been focusing much more on practices that feel sustainable long-term. This is just Parshvo Tanasana. We've touched on this a number of times throughout the practice, but this is just the plain old pose. So hands could be on the floor, hold the front ankle, you can reach back. I'll bend halfway, get my back to engage. I'll do a reverse prayer here. This arm variation is not, oh, it is in the Iyengar sequence. I see it on the little drawing now. So there we go. Not just in Ashtanga, but this is the presentation of the posture in the Ashtanga yoga system. And I was lucky to never get seriously injured doing as much Ashtanga as I did for as long as I did. After learning fourth series and doing that pretty consistently for a year, maybe a year and a half, I decided to count my blessings and stop doing all that to my body every day. So Parshvo Tanasana on the second side. I create the shape in the spine first. Right? I've done, well, enough of all kinds of things that when I fold forward in my spine, my core thinks that I'm doing a sit-up. And initially you can try to engage that consciously and then back off and relax it because you don't want to hold the abdomen too firm. But as I start to flex the spine, my six-pack engages, and the sides of my abdomen, especially this left side, because the hip is in flexion, and so the hip is doing some of the work, it gets quite soft. The right side's soft, but not as soft. The hip is lengthened here, so those muscles are trying to work a bit. And so that means I've gotten my core to fire, the back has taken its shape, and then everything else that I do is kind of just manipulation of the legs and hips. But my spine is safe. And you could think of that as, quote unquote, moving from the core. That my core muscles were one of, if not the first thing to make this posture happen. That keeps my spine safe, keeps my abdomen strong. In theory, it has benefits for the internal organs. Harder to prove.
And then it lets me know where the real limitations of my legs are. Many people, once they flex the spine, their hamstrings will give them a lot of resistance. I'll keep it here. A lunge with the hands in reverse prayer is probably a good thing. All right. This is the best play on this entry and exit that I found for this pose. It's okay. It's not the best, but it is what it is. This is going to be a Prasarita Padottanasana. So I'm going to rotate to the left here. Then I come up into this type of horse stance. And in the Iyengar sequence, it's just the classic forward fold, but I usually use this to do some spinal movements. So I rotate to the right, I come down through the center and up, and I rotate to the left, and I come down through the center and up. That just made a figure eight. If I were to do that on repeat, I'd be making a figure eight pattern with my spine. I don't do it on repeat here. I tend to just do it on once, just once. Then I'm going to side bend towards the right and then rotate to the left. And I might even, it's like a side angle pose, yes? Through the center and up. This type of stuff shows up in the Yoga Synergy system. Simon Borg, Olivier, and Simon and Bianca. Bianca's last name, I haven't met Bianca in person. Matchless, maybe? Matches, M-A-C-H, ends in maybe an S-S, I don't know. But I've spent some time with Simon. And any others here? Yes, and then my knees have been bent so I can create that forward fold. Spine is where it wants to be. Then I set up the legs to be in a more traditional Prasarita Padottanasana. I can push my shoulders towards my thighs and then draw the elbows towards my feet. That creates a bandha at the shoulder. The muscles beneath the armpits, pec lat, and the muscles above, mostly deltoid and some rotator cuff, are engaged at the same time. Simultaneous co-activation of opposing muscles. They normally don't play together, forcing the antagonist to become synergists. A lot of anatomy jargon there, but what else can we do here? We could interlace the hands. This is an Ashtanga variation. Flipping the grip. Getting to the shoulders a bit. I did some weightlifting for the shoulders today. Nice to undo a little of that bench press, overhead press. Again, I like to bend the knees on the way up. That drops my hips. Makes it safer on the spine. Now, I can rotate this way. That way I get the opposing lunge. And the step forward and step back are reversed. Right? In theory, I could repeat that posture by stepping the left leg forward this time and do the whole kind of thing again and try to, fully even it out, but I don't need to do all that today. But if you wanted to really have fun with that, you could alternate side to side and keep doing different variations and doing your spinal movements again and so on and so forth. It's an Uttanasana. So I find this Malasana shape first. If you can't Malasana, put some height under your heels. Put a yoga blanket here. It's a very useful shape. Full flexion of the ankle, dorsiflexion of the ankle, full flexion of the knee, and full flexion of the hip. And so it's returning to the fetal shape, which I think is important
And it's something, because in the West we don't live on the floor anymore. We have chairs, we have elevated beds. But if you travel through other parts of the world, you'll see that people still live on the ground. That they might be farming, and so they're down low a lot, crawling around, kneeling, squatting. They sit cross-legged on the floor, so they're coming up and down off of the floor repeatedly throughout their day. And then when I was in Vietnam, I saw a number of people cooking on the street, often in a type of squatting position. They wouldn't be so narrow in their legs, but they'd have a big pot here and they maybe stir it, or they're doing something like this, traveling throughout Southeast Asia, you see a lot of different stances. But in the West, we don't do this much, and I think that's partly why we have so many hip and back problems. We've lost our relationship with the ground. We've lost the ability to fetalize our body. Spine puts a lot of pressure in the abdomen here. Good. So Uttanasana. I should be further forward. Yep, okay. So, again, I was here, I got the spine first, and then it's just a straightening of the legs. A lot of people get stuck here, and if they don't lose the contact of the abdomen and the thighs, you see that their hamstrings start to bounce, right? That they've reached the limits of the relationship between their back and their legs. It can be useful to not go beyond that point. So, I'm gonna hold on here. This is kind of like a Bikram thing. It creates that bandha, right? It pushes the shoulders towards the thighs, and then the elbows move outwards. Good. There's some smart stuff in Bikram yoga. Do a flat back here. So I feel the back muscles have engaged, and I'll straighten my legs. And Bikram yoga was actually maybe the first quote-unquote real yoga that I did. Prior to going to Bikram classes, I was doing a lot of stretching and calisthenics and yoga-related things with a friend who was a personal trainer. And there was a Bikram studio that had a 1-month intro, 30-day, 30 classes type of deal, or $30 for 30 days, something like that. Then I'll take a full malasana. I've lost my ability to bind in this shape. I've gained mass and lost flexibility. And the combination of those two things has made binding not happen. Could probably get there with an assist, but I don't know that it's needed. So that is the standing sequence. From here, I would do some gentle inverted practice. Could perhaps stay longer in the Uttanasana, in the standing forward fold, to prepare the body to invert. That gets the head below the heart. It's not a full inversion, the legs are on the ground, but you're getting that blood flow to the head. Maybe do a down dog from there, and then a simple headstand, shoulder stand. I typically do them in that order, which is an Iyengar order of things. In Ashtanga, they use the shoulder stand to counter the back bending that happens before it. That you do a number of wheel or Urdhva Dhanurasana, sometimes with drop backs or tick-tocks, which can include scorpions if you progress far enough. And they use shoulder stand because shoulder stand is more of a forward fold, and it's a bit more pacifying, and I think they use that to counter those back bends. But because I haven't been back bending, I do the headstand first, which puts more pressure on the neck in theory, and then you do the shoulder stand afterwards, and that lengthens the neck. And that's the order that BKS Iyengar and his system of yoga typically teaches. So that's what's next on my agenda. I hope this was useful. I hope you enjoyed the commentary. I did my best to explain what I was doing and perhaps why. So thank you.